Hey guys, tonight we explore something few have mastered, yet all will need: how to endure without complaining. What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Epictetus. In the next 3 minutes, you'll understand why Marcus chose silence over arguing. Picture the fading sun falling over the rooftops of ancient Rome. The streets begin to quiet. The fires in hearths cast golden flickers on stone walls. You sit alone with an old scroll written in the hand of a man who carried the weight of an empire, not just with dignity, but in silence. You may not be emperor, but you have burdens. You carry disappointments, slights, responsibilities no one thanks you for. It's tempting to voice it all, to let the world know how hard it's been. But what if you didn't? What if you did as Marcus Aurelius did, acknowledging the pain privately, then calmly stepping into your day anyway? To be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over, he wrote. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. He expected hardship. He welcomed it, not because he was naive, but because he saw life as a series of tests designed not to punish him, but to sharpen him. If you expect each day to unfold smoothly with no pushback, no offense, no ache, you're preparing for a life that doesn't exist. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. To understand this better, let's go back to an ancient lesson from Marcus Aurelius. You rise before the sun, as he did dressing, simply breathing in cold air that stings your skin just enough to remind you you are alive, and life is not about ease. The emperor did this daily, not for ritual, but for training. If the day began with difficulty, so be it. If a soldier sneered, a senator betrayed, a servant stumbled, he would not waste words on complaint, because that would only feed the flame of resentment. Here's the part that cuts. Marcus suffered. He wasn't spared. Plague took his children. War consumed his years. Betrayal came from those closest. And yet, no tirades. No why me. Only if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. He understood something most of us try to ignore, that pain is part of the contract. You want a life of virtue, of meaning, then expect friction. Expect weather. No farmer curses the rain, and no Stoic complains when challenged. Scholars still debate whether Marcus was too hard on himself. Was his refusal to speak of his pain a strength or repression? But the Stoics didn't see suppression. They saw refinement. Words wasted on complaint were energy taken from action. Tonight, you begin training for that kind of quiet resilience. Not because you're emotionless, but because you've chosen something higher than reaction. You've chosen control. The day unfolds, and as it does, small annoyances greet you like familiar ghosts. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A co-worker rolls their eyes during a meeting. A friend forgets something important. These are not grand betrayals, but tiny barbs sharp enough to bleed the spirit if you let them. You think of Marcus again, walking the marble halls of his palace with dust on his cloak and the weight of Rome on his back. He knew the quiet insult of dismissal, the sting of unspoken disapproval. But still no complaints. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed, he wrote. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. You pause at that. It sounds strange. Aren't you entitled to feel hurt? Yes, of course. But entitlement doesn't mean you have to indulge every emotion like it's sacred. The Stoic path isn't about denying feeling. It's about choosing what to do with it. So you breathe. You see the moment for what it is, a spark. You decide not to add your breath to the flame. At this point, the modern world might tell you, speak your truth, defend your space. But Marcus didn't rush to every battlefield. He knew not every insult deserves a rebuttal. Not every slight needs a speech. Look within, he would say, for the fountain of good. If that fountain runs clear, what others do cannot muddy it. Historians wonder how Marcus maintained this calm while surrounded by political chaos, betrayal, and even civil war. Was it discipline, detachment, or something deeper, a trust in reason, in virtue as its own reward? Whatever it was, it gave him strength. It gave him peace. Now you test the same approach. When your pride urges you to respond, to lash out, to set the record straight, you do nothing. Not out of weakness, but from power, true power. Endurance without complaint is not the same as silence out of fear. It's a silence chosen with purpose. It says, you don't control me, not even with your cruelty. And in this, you begin to reclaim a deeper kind of freedom, the kind no insult can reach. Later, you sit alone watching shadows move slowly across the floor. The world has quieted, but inside your thoughts still stir. You replay the scene again. That offhand comment, that raised eyebrow, that careless tone. It lingers longer than it should. You wonder why. Why does it echo? Why does a moment that's already passed still occupy your mind like a guest who won't leave? Marcus Aurelius once asked himself the same. In his Meditations, he wrote, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." You consider that. Not the comment, but what you believed it meant. Not the look, but the story you told yourself about it. So you start to peel it back. Was the insult really about you or about them? Was the sharp word thrown because you deserved it, or because someone else lacked the composure to restrain themselves? The Stoics teach when someone acts out of anger or malice, it says more about their state of mind than yours. You are not the emotion they project. You are the stillness that decides how to receive it. In Seneca's letters, he reminds Lucilius a wise man is indifferent to praise and blame. Not because he's arrogant, but because he understands how fleeting and unreliable human opinions are. You think of ancient Rome again, of crowded forums, of bitter senates, of soldiers speaking in hushed tones. Marcus Aurelius ruled amidst gossip and betrayal. Yet still he returned to his journal night after night, reminding himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. You begin to see that the path to enduring without complaint isn't suppression, it's understanding. When someone insults you, you pause not to swallow your feelings, but to sort them, sift them, see which ones are truly yours to carry. And usually you find the answer is none. So now in this quiet moment, you give yourself permission to let go, not because the world is gentle, but because you are learning to be. You rise from your seat, walk slowly past the dimly flickering oil lamp, and glance toward the window where the breeze slips in. The city sleeps, but you, like Marcus Aurelius before battle, remain alert, reflective. You ask yourself, if someone wrongs me, must I match their fire with fire? It's tempting to snap back, to correct the slight. But the Stoics saw anger not as strength, but as a failure of reason. Marcus, in one of his most tender meditations, cautions, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. You take that in, slowly, quietly. You understand that retaliation does not restore dignity. It only binds you tighter to the offender's ignorance. Still, your heart protests. What about justice? What if the insult was public, unfair? Must you accept everything silently? This is where the Stoic tension lives, not in passivity but in precise restraint. You have the right to speak, but do you need to? You have the power to strike. But should you? Epictetus once told his students, if someone slaps you, ask not, why did he hit me? But rather, why was I disturbed by it? a challenging idea, almost cruel in its demand. But within it is freedom. You walk a little further now, brushing your fingertips across the stone walls worn smooth by time. In Rome, these walls would have heard both laughter and betrayal, celebration and conspiracy. Marcus governed through it all, friends turning enemies, generals testing loyalties, and yet he kept writing, kept reflecting, kept returning to the question, is this within my control? You ask the same. And what you find is this: when you respond with calm to cruelty, you deny it its echo, you break the chain, you leave the fire without feeding it. The world may throw sharp stones at you, but you by choice do not pick them up. You stand quietly proud in that stillness. Not because the world is kind, but because you choose to be. You take a slow breath as the silence deepens around you. The kind of silence that lets you hear your own thoughts more clearly, where one question stands tall among the rest. What kind of person do you want to be when you're wronged? Marcus Aurelius faced insults not from strangers, but from senators, military men, and sometimes even his own friends. They whispered behind his back, questioned his resolve, his compassion, even his strength. Still, he wrote, "It is not the man who has insulted you who harms you, but your own opinion that you have been insulted." And so you pause here, not to defend yourself, but to observe yourself. You imagine standing before a crowd, a voice rising against you, rude, brash, maybe even unfair. You feel that tightening in your chest. But instead of reacting, you step back mentally. You don't clench your fists. You don't meet the raised voice with your own. You notice your breath instead. You choose to stay rooted like a tree in wind. To the Stoics, this wasn't weakness, it was mastery. Because the person who controls their mind controls their fate. But there's a deeper truth beneath that. A truth Marcus knew all too well, that the truly powerful don't have to prove anything. They embody it. You remember the stories of Marcus's patience, how he forgave those who plotted against him, how he continued working beside them calmly. Historians still debate whether this made him naive or noble, but the fact remains he endured, ruled, and died with his dignity intact. So now you ask yourself, if someone lashes out at you, what would it cost to remain silent? To simply meet their fire with your stillness, perhaps more than you're used to, but far less than the cost of letting them rule your peace. You lean against the cool wall, now arms crossed, feeling a subtle confidence begin to form. Not loud, not prideful, just steady. Just enough. You continue walking deeper into the quiet of your thoughts. The lamps are fewer here. Shadows stretch longer, but you don't mind them. Shadows, like insults, only grow when the light behind them is strong. There's a Stoic lesson hidden in that. Marcus once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." You pause at that, because it seems so contradictory. Doesn't pain mean you've been hurt? Doesn't insult mean someone's crossed a line? But Marcus wasn't speaking as a man detached from the world. He was a ruler surrounded by schemes and betrayals, wars and illness. He knew what it meant to be disrespected. He also knew this: the opinion we form about an event gives it its power. It's not the insult itself, it's the judgment you attach to it. You recall a moment, perhaps it was recent, when someone dismissed your efforts, laughed at your idea, rolled their eyes at your presence. You carried that with you all day, maybe even longer. Not because of what they did, but because of the meaning you gave to it. This is where Stoicism sharpens its edge. What if you could remove the story? What if an insult was simply air-moving words falling from someone else's confusion? What if you were free from the urge to attach your worth to another person's bad day? You pass a fountain now. The water glows faintly in the moonlight. It flows without resistance, doesn't argue with the stones it passes. You imagine your mind like that water, fluid, clear, unable to be held back by someone else's bitterness. Some scholars question if this Stoic resilience is repression. Is it unhealthy to feel nothing at all when wronged? But Stoicism doesn't say you feel nothing. It says you don't feed it. You notice that now. The thought of that insult from earlier, it doesn't sting quite as much. Not because it changed, but because you did. You walk on, not above the world, but beside it, still and unshaken. Your steps bring you into a quieter quarter of the city, where the streets grow narrow and the voices fade. The stones beneath your feet feel smoother now, worn by centuries. A breeze moves past, a soft gesture from nature, indifferent and balanced. You reflect on the moments when someone tested your patience, prodded your composure, dared you to react. Maybe they interrupted you rudely or dismissed your ideas in front of others. Maybe it was that one word they used, sarcastic, loaded, and meant to provoke. And maybe you almost let it work. But you catch yourself in that memory now. You recall something Epictetus taught. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You pause at that. Complicit. The word is sharp, but freeing. It means you hold the final lever, that someone else's bad behavior doesn't write your story unless you hand them the pen. Marcus Aurelius lived among generals, politicians, and deceivers. Some tried to flatter him. Others tried to undermine him. He knew he couldn't control what people did, but he could control what those actions meant to him. The best revenge, he once wrote, is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That's it, isn't it? You don't rise above pettiness with more pettiness. You don't escape the fire by throwing more logs on it. You walk away from it and stay cool. You picture Marcus seated in his study. A letter has arrived, unfair, cruel, written by someone eager to spark rage. But instead of reacting, Marcus dips his pen calmly into ink. Writes only what must be said. Nothing more. His silence becomes his strength. His clarity becomes his reply. Now you imagine yourself in that role. In your workplace, at dinner, on the street. Someone speaks from ego. You hear it. You feel the tug to respond. But instead you become still. You breathe. You let it pass through like wind through open windows. And it passes, quicker than you'd think. There is no victory in showing them they've won. And no strength in pretending you're unaffected. True calm is the kind that doesn't even need to perform. Scholars debate, is this Stoic restraint cold or courageous? Is it detachment or is it mastery? You feel the answer rising in you, not as an idea, but as a sensation. It is neither cold nor indifferent. It's the warmth of control, the comfort of knowing that you decide who touches your peace. And tonight, as you walk these shadowed paths, you remember the world can shout, insult, twist, but your center remains yours alone. The streets grow darker now, lit only by torches casting long shadows across the walls. You can almost hear the creak of ancient shutters, the rustle of robes brushing against stone. Rome sleeps, but your mind wanders gently into another lesson, the kind only hardship can teach. You recall a time when someone slandered you, not loudly perhaps, but with that quiet poison whispers behind your back, a subtle shift in tone, a joke made at your expense. It stung. It stayed with you longer than it should have. Why? Because you believed for a moment that their words defined your worth. But tonight, as your breath slows, you remember what Seneca once wrote. A wise man is indifferent to the opinion of the foolish. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. If someone throws mud, it doesn't make you dirty unless you decide to roll in it. Marcus Aurelius knew this all too well. Even as emperor, his actions were scrutinized, distorted, attacked. But he never made public arguments in his defense. Instead, he asked himself, "Does what they say make me worse? If not, why should I care?" That quiet question is armor, not to hide behind, but to move forward with. You picture Marcus walking through the forum, people watching, gossiping, and yet he walks with no need to retaliate. His dignity doesn't demand applause. His virtue doesn't depend on their applause. He simply lives it. You begin to understand, when you stop needing everyone's agreement, you begin to own your life. Still, part of you wonders, what if the critic is someone close, a family member, a mentor, a friend? Shouldn't their words matter? The Stoics don't deny the sting, but they urge you to ask, is it true? If yes, grow from it. If no, let it fall like rain off oiled skin. Either way, you don't have to carry it. Some scholars suggest this Stoic posture leads to isolation, that it dulls human connection. But connection, you now realize, isn't obedience to every opinion. It's clarity. It's knowing who you are well enough to listen without absorbing. You return to that moment, the whisper, the insult, and see it now with different eyes. Not as a wound, but as a lesson. A test passed. A weight you no longer carry. And in this gentle moment, under the imagined sky of a Roman night, you feel it, the relief of not needing to be understood. The power of being grounded, not just defended. You walk on lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you did. You wander now past a quiet garden, ivy clings to stone, a faint breeze stirs the olive leaves. You pause by the fountain, listening to the steady trickle of water. It sounds like time itself, slow and patient. This is where you reflect on the difference between instinct and mastery. Someone insults you. Your heart jumps, your chest tightens, and for a moment you're no longer yourself, you're heat and fire and sharp edges. That first reaction, it isn't weakness, it's nature. But what happens next, that's character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you, and you feel that now deeply. The insult is just air sound movement. You're the one who gives it shape or lets it go. Tonight you begin to separate the two, the event and your story about it. The words said and the wounds they open. But those wounds you're learning are often old. Childhood echoes, past failures, ancient bruises, and the Stoic path. It doesn't erase them. It teaches you to sit beside them, look them in the eye and say, you don't control me anymore. You think of a young Roman soldier slandered by another in front of his cohort. The old you would imagine him exploding, fists clenched. But the wiser version, he breathes, waits, responds not with fury but with silence or a question. Is what you said meant to help me grow? If not, you can keep it. And with that, the moment ends, not with fire but with water. Still, a part of you resists. Isn't silence weakness? Doesn't it invite more insult? Here the Stoics pose a question. What's stronger, reining in your emotions or unleashing them? What requires more control, tearing someone down or standing tall without needing to? Scholars debate whether Stoicism suppresses too much, whether it ignores the human need to cry out. But the Stoics never said emotion was wrong, only that it must be chosen, not automatic. You may feel anger, yes, but you are not your anger. You are the one who notices it, the one who decides. And tonight, as moonlight finds the edge of the stone wall, you decide that not every fire must be fed. Some must be watched until they cool, until they teach. You sit quietly and feel that power, the strength of not reacting, of not needing to win the last word, of choosing stillness when the world demands a performance. That is mastery. Not over others, but over the only domain that ever truly belongs to you yourself. Now, beneath the same night sky, you imagine another face, one that wronged you not just once, but many times. The kind of person whose presence alone stirs an ache in your chest. Their words echo in your memory, sharpened by time. You feel the sting, not just of what they said, but of who they are, unfair, unkind, unrepentant. You ask yourself, what do I do when someone like that walks into my life again? Marcus Aurelius didn't ask if such people would come. He assumed it. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He didn't say it with anger, but with clarity. You start to understand the wisdom there. To be shocked by cruelty is to expect a perfect world. To be disturbed by rudeness is to pretend human nature has changed. And tonight you sit with this question. Is it possible to prepare your mind in advance, not with paranoia, but peace? You remember a moment in Marcus's reign when he was betrayed by a friend in the Senate. Rather than retaliate, he calmly wrote his reflections, reminding himself that nature puts thorns on roses and storms on seas, that a rational person should expect such disruptions and meet them with inner order. It's not apathy, it's awareness. And so you practice that now. You see that difficult person not as an enemy, but as an opportunity, a test of your progress. A mirror showing whether your philosophy is theory or truth. You think of Epictetus's teaching. When someone irritates you, know that it is your own opinion which is irritating you. The first time you hear that, it sounds like blame. But tonight it feels like freedom. Because if it's your opinion that causes the sting, then it is also in your power to soften it, to release it. Still, a part of you tightens. Shouldn't bad behavior be confronted? Shouldn't rudeness be called out? Yes, but not always with words. Sometimes the most powerful response is restraint. Not because you fear conflict, but because you refuse to be reduced by it. Philosophers still debate the boundary between acceptance and passivity. Is Stoicism too tolerant? Does it turn noble people into quiet sufferers? Yet what you find here is not surrender, but strategy. You learn to choose your battles, to conserve your inner resources, to rise above not out of pride, but out of peace. And so tonight, when your thoughts drift back to that face that hurt, that moment of sting, you don't fight it. You let it come. You observe it. And then softly you say, "Ah, yes, you again. I was expecting you." And in that quiet acknowledgement, the power shifts. Not to them, but to you. Now you stand at a crossroads of the soul, the space between reaction and response. It's here that Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life. Not in public spectacles, not in wars or decrees, but in that interior silence between the stimulus and the reply. You reflect on this. What makes someone truly strong? Is it domination, shouting louder than the critic? Or is it the quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout at all? You remember a passage from Meditations where Marcus writes, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And that line doesn't just live in ink, it breathes now right here in you. You think back to the countless times someone's rudeness pulled you out of character. The clench in your jaw, the compulsion to fire back, the surge of adrenaline, the shallow breath. You weren't calm, you were captured. But tonight, you reclaim your agency. Picture a Roman street. A merchant insults another over a small dispute. The air crackles. A soldier watching nearby doesn't intervene, but his eyes remain still, unmoved. He knows this storm isn't worth walking into. It will pass. That soldier is you. Not weak, not retreating, simply centered. You've seen enough storms to know that thunder doesn't need your permission to fade. Still, your modern mind wrestles with it. Shouldn't you say something? Shouldn't you do something? The Stoics remind you your actions matter, but so do your reasons for them. Are you confronting someone out of justice or ego? Are you teaching or punishing? Seneca once warned that anger disguises itself in noble clothing. It claims to act for truth, but often serves pride. He called anger a temporary madness. And when you remember that you hesitate just long enough to choose something better, you take a deep breath. This is not suppression. It is transmutation. You're not bottling your fire, you're shaping it into light. You revisit the philosophical question, is Stoicism emotional avoidance? Critics argue that it trains people to detach too much to risk losing empathy in the name of control. But when you read the writings of Marcus or Seneca closely, you don't see coldness. You see love for humanity. You see care. You see grief that is allowed to exist, just not rule. And so you ask yourself, how do you endure the next rude person without closing your heart? By practicing what Marcus practiced, turning every insult into an invitation. Not to withdraw, but to go inward, to meet your rising frustration like an old friend. There you are, you say to it, let's sit and talk. You realize that controlling your reaction isn't weakness, it's artistry. It's what a sculptor does with marble, what a poet does with pain. You take what's raw and make something noble. Tonight, lying there, you feel your breath slow. You remember that the world can be loud, but you don't have to be. The next rude person will come. And when they do, you will not be surprised. You will be prepared. You reflect now on one of the most overlooked truths, that many people who hurt others are themselves deeply hurt. Not in a poetic, forgiving way, but in a practical, observable sense. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When someone does wrong, it's because they are mistaken about what is good." In that sentence is a whole philosophy of understanding. It doesn't excuse evil, but it explains its origin, ignorance, blindness, pain. You remember standing in a crowded hallway, once someone pushing past, throwing a comment at you sharp enough to draw blood, but not the physical kind. You could feel your body stiffen, the desire to retaliate rising like smoke. And yet, what if you saw them as someone unwell? Would your anger have been so righteous? Picture a Roman bathhouse. Steamy air chatter echoing through stone. A man slips, another laughs cruelly. Marcus observes not with judgment, but with curiosity. Why did he laugh? To elevate himself. To mask his own shame, Marcus doesn't scold, he contemplates. He reminds himself, you are just as flawed, and tomorrow you might be the one who slips. This ability to see others' failings as echoes of your own humanity is not natural. It must be trained. And training takes repetition. You begin asking, what is my first instinct when someone is rude? To attack, to protect, to withdraw, or to learn? What if every rude encounter became a philosophical prompt? Epictetus might pose it like this: you are disturbed not by the event, but by your opinion about it. The rudeness is real, yes, but your suffering, that's optional, that's interpretive. Scholars still debate whether Stoicism truly leads to empathy or just indifference. If all suffering is simply a judgment, is there room left for compassion? Can we both detach and care? You arrive at your own answer, yes. Detachment gives you the space to choose compassion, not as a reflex, but as a response. So next time someone interrupts you, mid-sentence, mocks your ideas, or speaks with contempt, you pause. You breathe. You look at them not as a villain, but as a mirror. What wound inside them is bleeding out into this moment. You don't have to fix them, but you also don't have to join them. There's a quiet power in that. A strange, radiant dignity. Like the sun, it doesn't argue with the fog. It just shines until the fog no longer knows what to do with itself. You lie there tonight, your body softer than before, your mind clearer. You know that people will be unkind. You also know that you have options, and in that knowledge there is freedom. You think back to a market square in Rome, the clatter of wheels, the sharp barter of merchants, the sweat of laborers. In the chaos, a philosopher stands quietly, observing, not judging. That figure could be Marcus, or it could be you. You watch as a customer scolds a vendor, unfairly perhaps, out of hunger or a bad day. The vendor, instead of retaliating, only nods and says, "As you wish." That stillness, was it weakness? No, it was restraint. It was power chosen, not unleashed. Marcus Aurelius reminds you, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Not to mock the offender, not to stoop to their level, but to hold yourself aloft like an olive tree standing untouched by a petty squabble below. You breathe into that image. Because in your own life there are echoes. A boss who interrupts with contempt, a stranger who cuts in line, a sibling who speaks sharply in moments of stress. These people are not your enemies. They are your training partners. You ask yourself, not angrily, but curiously, what would Marcus do here? And not the emperor, but the man. The tired middle-aged father, the soldier with aching knees, the student of life struggling with his own impulses. Would he raise his voice? Would he win the argument? Or would he quietly let the moment pass and reclaim his peace? The truth is, reacting harshly often takes less energy than staying silent. But staying silent wisely, that takes presence. It takes humility. It takes an understanding that not every insult is worthy of response. That sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is nothing. That's not apathy. It's awareness. It's self-command. Some philosophers debate whether this ideal of restraint is realistic in a world of injustice. They wonder if everyone turns the other cheek, do we not become doormats? But Stoicism doesn't ask you to be passive. It asks you to be deliberate. You are not surrendering. You are choosing when to act and when to remain unmoved. And sometimes silence speaks louder than any clever retort. Picture Marcus on campaign, exhausted by politics and battle. He receives a letter filled with blame from the Senate. He could have responded with fury. Instead, he pens a few calm lines in return, measured, composed, unimpressed by the drama. Then he returns to his duties. Why? Because he knew what really mattered. Not pride, not image, but inner order. So when someone tries to bait you on the street, online, at the dinner table, you don't need to swallow their hook. You are not a fish. You are a philosopher in disguise. Let them cast their line. You stay still. Because stillness is not emptiness. It's wisdom gathering strength beneath the surface. You sit quietly now, picturing a Roman road stretching far into the horizon, straight, deliberate, carved into the earth by generations of discipline. That road, in many ways, mirrors your path. And just like the travelers who endured sundust and bandits to reach their destination, you too must decide, will you keep walking when discomfort mocks you from the edges? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When jarred unavoidably by circumstance, revert at once to yourself, and don't lose the rhythm more than you can help." It's an invitation not to be flawless, but to be responsive, to return, to realign. You remember the last time someone tested your patience. Maybe they raised their voice, rolled their eyes, or laughed at your calm like it was weakness. Maybe you walked away, but their words followed you like smoke. And maybe even now their face appears behind your eyelids as you reflect. But now you ask, who really disturbed your peace? Was it them, or your attachment to their opinion? Because the Stoics didn't expect the world to be kind. They expected themselves to be resilient. That's the trade. You stop expecting fairness and you start practicing fortitude. You recall a moment in Marcus's life. News reached him that one of his closest generals had betrayed an order costing lives. The court demanded swift punishment, public disgrace. But Marcus paused. He listened. He judged the facts, not the fury. And then he forgave. To many that was weakness, but to the Stoics it was power wielded with care. You take that with you tonight, not as a commandment, but as an invitation. What if your most radical act is to stay composed when the world wants you to unravel? Scholars still ask, was Marcus's tolerance admirable or naive? Should an emperor not strike back? But you know the answer isn't simple. Because Stoicism isn't pacifism, it's prudence. It's choosing your battles with eyes open and ego quiet. And when someone next disrespects you, not just in private but publicly, you remember that your reaction is the real test. Will you let their noise become your soundtrack, or will you hold fast to your rhythm? You are not a puppet. You are not a mirror. You are the flame that remains steady even when the wind rises. And so you come to the end of this reflection, not in triumph, but in clarity. The city outside your window has long gone quiet. Maybe the hum of a distant fan, the creak of an old pipe, or the occasional breath of wind keeps you company now. You lie still, your hands resting loosely on your chest, like a Roman philosopher reclining in the last hour of twilight. You whisper to yourself one final quote, perhaps one of Marcus's gentlest: if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple, firm, unbending. You think about how often complaints disguise themselves as truth, how easily we fall into the rhythm of explaining our pain instead of understanding it. The world wrongs you, you want to tell someone. You want to prove it wasn't fair. But Stoicism asks, what will proving it fix? Marcus could have spent his years defending himself, against war, against betrayal, against the pain in his bones. Instead, he poured his mind onto parchment in the dead of night, writing for no one but himself. Meditations, he called it. A diary, not a decree. Tonight, you realize why that mattered. You too can write your own meditations, not in ink, but in silence. Not in speeches, but in restraint. You've seen that bad people exist, that rudeness is inevitable, that suffering comes without warning, and yet, you endure, without theatrics, without complaint. Scholars still debate, was Stoicism too cold, too passive, too self-denying? But lying here now, you don't feel numb, you feel awake, you feel steady. And maybe that's the lesson: to let go of needing the world, to be gentle, and to learn to be gentle with yourself in its place. Let that be your final posture. Let that be your strength. Let your silence speak of depth, not defeat. Because in the stillness, in the quiet, where no one's watching, that's where the Stoic truly lives. The room is darker now. Even your thoughts feel softer, as if they've been washed by the tide of all these ancient reflections. You breathe in long and slow and release. Nothing urgent remains. Nothing must be solved tonight. Only the gentle cadence of calm and the quiet echo of Marcus's lessons. You've learned something tonight, not about glory, not about conquest, but about endurance without spectacle. You've seen how strength doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it simply stays seated when the world expects you to rise in outrage. Let your breath be smooth now, like water flowing around a stone. Let your body relax in stages, starting with your jaw, your shoulders, your chest. There's nowhere else to be. No judgment here. Only stillness. Only a return to your center. And as you close your eyes, Maybe you picture that Roman courtyard again, pillars casting long shadows, scrolls stacked by candlelight, sandals echoing softly against the stone. A lone figure sits there unmoved by gossip or noise. That figure is you. You, the one who no longer flinches at offense. You, the one who no longer complains to be heard. You, the one who, though life may bruise, endures in silence and leaves no wound behind. You are the steady one, the quiet strength in a loud world. The Stoic finally at rest.